England, England, England. Y'all did it again, you bastards. Y'all did it again. Big up England, man. Big up England. First of all, Swiss Nation, man. Swiss Nation, man. Y'all made me so proud, bro. I can't believe it, bro. I was convinced Swiss Nation had one more in them, bro. When Mbolo scored that goal, I was saying, yeah, we're through, bro. This is it. Swiss Nation. We going all the way, bro. This is gonna be the greatest prediction of all time. But damn, man. Yeah, man. Everything happens for a reason, bro. Swiss Nation. We had a good run, man. And we'll see you in 2 years in the US, man. But let's talk about England, bro. Yesterday was actually probably the most impressed I was with England this entire tournament. And that's not to say that they were absolutely like sensational. That's not to say that they were absolutely brilliant. But I do think that yesterday was the first time I actually looked at England with a bit of coherence to them. Defensively, they were actually pretty solid, I thought. Like, did Switzerland get some chances? Absolutely. But for the most part, I actually thought that they kept Switzerland somewhat under wraps. And it was really going forward that I was like, there's not too much happening, which has kind of been the theme of the story this tournament for England. But there was one guy yesterday that when shit wasn't going well, when the system was failing, when his teammates weren't making shit happen, the manager was struggling, couldn't come up with a tactical plan. Your striker is 5 yards away from where he needs to be consistently. Your number 10 and your left winger, they're not doing too much. These are the moments where big players produce big moments. What I just talked about just now, those are environments where, in my opinion, the best players rise. If you guys need to learn one thing about me as a football fan, if you haven't learned it already, because I repeat it quite often, one of the things I hate the most in football, especially in football discourse, is how many excuses people make for their favorite players. We are now entering a world, especially on football Twitter, but in general in football discourse, where people are supporting football players and football teams like they used to support their favorite artists. I call it Stan Twitter. That's what we're rapidly approaching. Nobody wants to hold their favorite players accountable. There always has to be an excuse. Oh, look at the manager he's playing in. Oh, look at what everyone else is doing. How can you blame him? Look at this guy, what he's doing. He's not playing in his favorite position. This isn't his favorite role. He's not getting enough support in the first phase. Sometimes those excuses are legitimate, right? Like I always say, every player has a role, and you need to get the most to maximize that role and minimize their weaknesses. I get that. But one thing I absolutely hate is when people don't hold their favorite players accountable. And yesterday, for everything that I just mentioned that people were complaining about, the system, the setup, the coach, not playing in your favorite position, not getting enough touches in your favorite zone, there's one player that did not apply to. Because in my opinion, chat, the best players produce the best moments in any kind of environment. And that's what Bukayo Saka did yesterday. Even before the goal, Bukayo Saka's performance yesterday was the best of the best for England. And for the most part, he's been one of, if not the best player for England at this tournament. No, I don't think he's played exceptional every single game. I am seeing something like, oh, Saka's the one guy this turn. Like, he hasn't been brilliant every single game. Let's make that very clear. But in a field full of weeds, he's maybe the one rose, to be honest with you. There's a few others. I'm not going to like, Kobe Mainoo has been good. Guehi has been good. Declan Rice has had his moments. But for the most part, Saka has been up there with England's better performers. Yesterday, for me, Bukayo Saka was England's best player. And that's even before the goal. Every single time England needs an out ball, every single time they get stuck in a situation, who are they looking for? Send it out to Bukayo Saka, who's hugging the touchline, and he finds a way of making something happen out of nothing. One thing that people need to become a lot more clear with when it comes to Bukayo Saka is how strong this kid actually is. Like, physically, he's a big kid. I think actually, he's 6 foot, right? How tall is Bukayo Saka? 5'10". Sorry, he's not 6 foot. He's 5'10". But the way he plays, he uses his body exceptionally well. And I'm not going to say he does it to this player's level, but a player that I always think of when I think of using their body to shield and protect the ball, especially playing out wide, was Eden Hazard. Not a big guy whatsoever, but his low center of gravity and his ability to kind of out-muscle players that appeared bigger than him was remarkable. Bukayo Saka has that trait as well too, because no matter whether you square him up face to face, or whether he's playing back to goal, or whether he's trying to outmuscle you side to side, Bukayo Saka uses his low center of gravity and his physicality exceptionally well to kind of like squeeze himself out of those kind of situations. Very, very well too. For me, the best ever at that, in my opinion, and you guys can go see clips. In fact, we can watch them later if you guys want. Juan Roman Riquelme was the best I've ever seen in my life at protecting the ball with his body. Exceptional. The best of all time. But he was the one really creating everything, right? He is the one kind of putting those dangerous balls into the box. I think Foden, to be honest with you, Foden had a good first 20 minutes where he was picking up the ball in like the half spaces and making some cute combinations. But I think Switzerland at one point adapted extremely well at backing off him. And then therefore saying, all right, come break down a deeper, compact block. And I think Foden really struggled at that. But the first 20 minutes, I thought Foden was decent. I thought Jude had a moment or two. And then he kind of fizzled out of the game too. But for me, the one that was consistently on it, in my opinion, was Bukayo Saka. I'm going to talk about a player later on because I'm up to here now with his performances. But the amount of times Bukayo Saka put balls into the box that were just kind of like begging for a guy to make a run and meet it first time, connect with it, and no one was there. I always believe, right? Yes, it's important to pick out players in the box, but sometimes what's even more dangerous is meeting a ball, is kind of playing a ball that's just waiting for a player to come meet it. That sometimes is the best pass. And Saka was putting balls into positions that were just begging, crying out for someone to come meet it first time. Didn't happen. Switzerland scored that goal, right? Because I think in the first half, I actually thought England were the slightly better team. I didn't think either team were exceptionally great, but I think England were the slightly better team. But the second half, I thought Switzerland came out a lot better. England came out flat, and I thought Switzerland came out a lot better. And they got their goal, and I think it was actually absolutely deserved. The goal that Mbolo scores at the back post, again, I'm not sure if that's Stones' fault, if that's Walker's fault, but that's a poor goal to concede. Honestly, with that many bodies in front, England should be getting to that before Mbolo gets a touch on the back post. I have to see that again because I'm not 100% sure whose fault it was, but for the most part, one thing I did notice, and I made a point of it, right? Because at some point it got obnoxious. Switzerland were purely attacking down England's right-hand side. So Switzerland's left-hand side, England's right-hand side. Everything that Switzerland were doing was coming down that side. The goal kind of comes off somebody at the back post on that side. Kyle Walker, in my opinion, didn't have a great game and hasn't had a good tournament. But the point is, Switzerland at that point, with 10, 15 minutes on the clock, get themselves ahead. And at that point, I think everybody's thinking to themselves, same old England. We know how this shit goes. We know how this ends up from here. I thought it was over. I can't lie. I thought it was over until big players produce big moments. Big players produce big moments, guys. I'm sorry. The best players of all time have been judged on their ability, or at least the best attackers, right? Every position has a different role. So I'm not going to say midfielders, but the best forwards have always been judged on their ability to produce big moments out of nothing. It's what I call X Factor. When your team's not playing well, when the system is failing, when the manager is, when you're not producing anything, when you are basically lost in the game and your team is crying out for a big moment, what can you do to change the game? That's exactly what Bukayo Saka did yesterday. Picking up the ball on the right, looking his defender right in the eyes, beating him off the dribble, and then fizzing that bottom corner off the post and in. It was a moment of absolute madness and a moment of absolute brilliance. There's no tactical setup there. There's no, okay, my fullback's going to overlap and now I have this. There's none of that, right? That's just great players producing great moments. I think Bukayo Saka deserves massive credit for that moment because that's a moment that they were crying out for and no one else was willing to produce. Jude Bellingham, who I gave massive credit for producing his moment against Slovakia, was nowhere to be seen yesterday. Phil Foden, for the most part, was nowhere to be seen yesterday. Harry Kane, you could be forgiven for thinking England were playing with 10. England needed a savior yesterday, and it was Bukayo Saka. So for me, he saved England. The reason England are playing tomorrow, or playing on Wednesday, against the Dutch in a Euro semifinal and are now one game away from returning to a Euro final, against all odds in my opinion, because they haven't played well for longer than 30, 45 minutes during a game at once. The reason they're going a game away from going to another Euro final, back-to-back, is because of Bukayo Saka yesterday. A moment of absolute brilliance. And from there, to be fair, I actually thought England picked up the game. That goal right there was almost like the moment England have needed all tournament to just wake up. Because from there, I actually thought they played pretty decently. Yes, Switzerland had chances on the other end. A few times, again, back post, Switzerland looked like they were kind of finding an opening. I thought Schär yesterday, or Fabian Schär, his output, I don't know how he was getting into these advanced positions from center back, by the way, right? But he was getting himself high up the pitch, and that final touch from him was awful yesterday. Schär yesterday had so many opportunities to just put a great ball into the box or to finish off a chance. He was absolutely awful in that regard. But I actually think that the substitutions for England massively improved them. One guy who, for me, right, I read a little bit of the noise, right? I don't always contribute to the conversation, but I pay attention to stuff. And I do feel like, I don't know whether it's a club rivalry thing, but I think people are being very harsh to Cole Palmer. Because for me, Cole Palmer's cameos, I'm not saying they're good enough for him to start on the right, because I think Saka, that's his position. But I think Cole Palmer's cameos consistently throughout this tournament have been great. I feel consistently he's come on and provided a spark to England. I'm not saying he's been like a world beater, but consistently he's providing you energy. He's providing you positivity. He's consistently looking to take on his player. He's consistently looking to take on chances. And for me, as a substitute, that's all you can ask. Bring some energy into the team. Usually, you bring on a substitution, sometimes to change a game, right? But maybe a player is getting more tired and you want to replace him with fresh legs. Cole Palmer, for me, has done a very, very good job numerous times throughout this tournament of kind of providing those fresh legs. Eze has come on numerous times and played as a wingback. Right? For all the talk of Saka playing on the left back or whatever, it's actually been Eberici Eze who Southgate is bringing on to play as a wide, basically as a wing back. He's basically playing as Trippier's replacement. He's been solid, right? It's a weird experiment. I don't know if I like it or hate it, but he's done a role. He's done his thing. Ivan Toney, another one in my opinion who comes on and provides maybe not better, but something different. All of a sudden, you have a guy that physically is able to occupy his center backs a lot more than the guy he's replacing, that's for sure. And then it gets to the penalties. And I can't lie, chat, the minute it went to penalties, there wasn't a moment in my mind that I didn't think England were going to win that. For starters, they have 2 penalty specialists. 3, I mean, one of them went off in Kane, but they have 2 penalty specialists. Ivan Toney, that's a banker. The way he took his penalty, he didn't look at the ball a single time after he dropped it. He looked the goalkeeper dead in the fucking eyes and buried that shit. He might be the best penalty taker in the world. He might. He genuinely might. And then you got Cole Palmer. That's another banker. Cole Palmer is not missing a penalty, bro. Those 2 right there, those are bankers. If you have those 2, you are starting off 2-0 in the penalty shootout. Everyone else, take care of business. But those 2, that's like a two free penalties. Harry Kane, if he's there, that's 3 free penalties for the most part. And Saka, right? Saka, obviously we know what happened at the last Euros. I'm sure England fans, because me, right? I'm watching as a neutral. There's no pressure on me. There's no fear in my heart. I'm just watching for fun. Saka, though, I'm sure England fans had their hearts in their mouths when he took that penalty. First of all, took so long on it, which the more I'm reading on Twitter these days, apparently that's a good thing, right? The amount of time he's taking to take deep breaths, stabilize himself, get himself in the zone, did that very well. I think he took like 9 seconds before his penalty. And the way he finished that, no goalkeeper is stopping that. No goalkeeper is stopping that. And then finally, Jude, of course. Jude is built for these moments, to be honest with you. Whether he plays a shit game or not, in a penalty shootout, Jude believes in himself so much, there's no way he's missing a penalty, in my opinion. And then you got Trent. Great penalty, great ball striker. So for me, there wasn't a single moment in my mind once it went to penalties that England were losing that. England were going to win that penalty shootout. So big up to England, man. Big up to England. Big up to Saka, because again, I can't speak highly enough about how much I rate that moment, guys. One thing you will learn from my content is that I love players stepping up and taking initiative and making things happen on their own. It's why I hate so many of the excuses that I've heard for Mbappe this tournament, that I've heard for Harry Kane this tournament, that I've heard from anybody, to be honest with you, right? I'm not asking guys to win tournaments on their own, but take initiative. I don't want to hear about the system every single time a player's not playing well. Anybody can play somewhat decently under a great system, under a great manager. But it takes real quality to produce when the chips are down. That for me is when you see real quality. But I'm sorry, I can't lie. There's one guy that I can't not talk about. I can't move on from this England segment without talking about him. Chat, we got to talk about Harry Kane. This has been an absolutely pathetic tournament from Harry Kane. I don't mean to be rude. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I got nothing against Harry Kane as a person. Great role model, great leader, great human being, great goal scorer. His records that he's pretty much produced everywhere he's been. You can't question that. But I'm sorry, the way Harry Kane has played at this tournament, as supposedly England's best player, as the captain, as supposedly the best striker on the planet, has been downright awful. Awful. And there's nothing any one of his fans, or his stans, I want to call them, because fans say it how it is. Fans don't make excuses for every single player no matter what. Stans do that. So I'm addressing the stans right now. I'm sorry. Your guy has been absolutely pathetic this tournament. Absolutely pathetic. I don't know if he's injured. I don't know if it's a back problem. I don't know what the hell is going on with Harry Kane. But I'm sorry. I saw Cam hold 700 quote tweets on his head for saying that Harry Kane shouldn't be a starter for England at the next World Cup. Is anybody booing him now? Is anybody booing him now? He looks off the pace now, let alone in 2 years. He looks worse now, let alone now in 2 years. The guy can't move. I'm sorry, chat. Harry Kane cannot move. And I know he's never been a speedster. I'm not talking about Mbappe right now. But the guy cannot physically move. Physically, in terms of like how imposing he is. Center backs are bullying him, bro. Every center back that's come up against Harry Kane has had the easiest task of this entire tournament. The easiest task of this entire tournament has been playing against Harry Kane. And this is my biggest issue with Harry Kane. It used to be the case, right? Cast your mind back 3-4 years ago when Mourinho was in charge of Spurs. The reason Harry Kane began dropping deep and starting to like spray passes left and right, playing those balls over the top and almost take a deeper role. The reason he initially did it, why was it, Chet? It wasn't because we were suddenly saying, oh, Harry Kane doesn't have legs anymore and this is how he has to play to depth. That wasn't the reason. The reason we gave credit to Harry Kane for doing it is because Spurs didn't have another creator. They didn't have a single creator on that team. It was Harry Kane. Eriksen had left at that point. Dele Alli was on the decline. Son is basically an outlet. They didn't have anybody else. So Harry Kane, for the needs of the team, had to drop deep to help create for the team as well as scoring goals. That's the initial reason why Harry Kane started dropping deep. Don't let anybody telling you now who says, oh, he drops deep because he needs outlets. Don't let anybody tell you that was the original reason. The original reason is because Spurs had no creators in that team. But the issue now is he's playing in a team with 3 creators. Saka is a creator, Foden is supposed to be a creator, and Jude Bellingham is supposed to be a creator. None of those 3 are outlets. So Harry Kane dropping deep and trying to play this pseudo-intellectual number 10 role is a waste of everyone's time. Because all he does is he drops deep, looks up, gets ready to play that Hollywood pass over the top, which he's brilliant at. No one can question that. But there's nobody there to make that run. And you know that. Harry Kane isn't doing that out of like, oh, it's second nature now. It's a cop-out. It's a cop-out because he knows physically he can't compete with the top center backs anymore. He can't do it anymore. This dropping deep act is to avoid the physical confrontation with the center backs. Don't let anybody tell you differently. And I'm sorry, this whole playmaking thing, they tried booing me too. You watch this tournament. You watch Harry Kane this tournament and you tell me that's an elite level playmaker. Don't lie to your eyes, man. Don't lie to your eyes. I know big accounts will try telling you, they'll try spamming compilations, they'll try telling you the amount of chances create. Watch with your eyes. This is not an elite level playmaker. The guy can't carry the ball. The guy can't dribble the ball. The guy isn't a great quick 1-2 passer. He has that incredible ball over the top and those incredible switches. I can't take that away from him. When it comes to that, he's the best in the world at that position at doing that. But I'm sorry, that's not all playmaking is. And it shows when you remove that pace in behind how limited of a playmaker he actually is. Because the best playmakers of all time, they don't rely this much on runners over the top. You can tell me whatever you want, bro. I can't be fooled. I cannot be fooled by this shit. I watched Karim Benzema play for 15 years and make at the highest level from that position. And that's not to say Benzema's as great a goal scorer as Kane. Because I know people are going to say, oh, Benzema, well, that's the guy Real Madrid fans wanted. They didn't want him out because he wasn't a good playmaker. They wanted him out because his finishing was lousy at one point. But Benzema's playmaking has never, ever, ever, ever in his life been questioned. And if anybody tells me otherwise, you're outing yourself as a casual. If you think Benzema, the reason why he was struggling at Real Madrid is because he wasn't a good playmaker, you have no idea what you're watching. The issue was his finishing. But playmaking, he's always been clear of Kane in that regard. Always. And I don't know what the solution was with Kane. I can't lie. Because at this point in this, like, look, Kane, one thing you can't take away from him as well, too, finishing, that's as good as it gets. Harry Kane is probably the best finisher in the world. One-on-one, there is not a doubt in my mind that Harry Kane finishes a chance. He's incredible. The ball striking. The way Harry Kane's foot connects with a ball is one of the best I've ever seen. He strikes a ball like no other, man. No question about it. But I'm sorry, it's starting to get more and more difficult to actually create for Harry Kane. How many times did Saka put a ball into the box that was just begging for someone to tap it in, begging for someone to make that run in? And Harry Kane is either hanging on the top of the box or hanging completely in no man's land. Even the goals England have scored this tournament. Look at where Harry Kane is when Jude Bellingham is heading the ball in. Look at where Harry Kane is when just look at him every single time England score a goal. He's never where you actually want him to be. I don't know with him, man. Honestly, this tournament has been atrocious. Like, and I'm not trying to like downplay everything he's done this season because he's scored a whole lot of goals. But one thing that really annoys me when you try criticizing Harry Kane or try even providing any kind of analysis on him is like, oh, you're criticizing a guy who scored 44 goals for Bayern Munich this season. Give me a 1 second, chat, right? I'm going to read you another guy's stats this year. So Harry Kane had the most goals in Europe this year with 36. Incredible. Serhou Guirassy scored 28. He was second. In the entirety of Europe's top 5 leagues, Guirassy had the second most goals in Europe. No one is talking about Guirassy like he's this untouchable force of unstoppable nature, guys. Kane scored a lot of great goals. That doesn't mean he's untouchable. Lautaro Martinez. I know every single person in this chat doesn't rate Lautaro Martinez. Every single person in this chat does not rate Lautaro Martinez. Most of Twitter doesn't rate Lautaro Martinez. They say he's a bottler. They say in big moments you can never count on him. He scores goals in Serie A. Anybody can do that. I'll tell you what. Lautaro Martinez scored 24 goals for Inter Milan this year, won Serie A MVP of the league, won the league with Inter Milan, scored in cup finals for them, scored in big games for them, and at Copa America right now is probably player of the tournament alongside James Rodriguez. But nobody ever talks about Lautaro Martinez. Nobody talks about how many goals he's scored in the last few years. He's scored 20 goals like 5 seasons in a row. And that's not me saying Lautaro is as great as Harry Kane, but this idea that Harry Kane, no one can talk about him because he scored a lot of goals this season. A lot of players score a lot of goals. they're still up for criticism. For me, the Harry Kane talk now is starting to annoy me. Because I feel like for me, like I said, I hate excuses. And I feel like he's the best player with the most excuses made about him. Every time there's an excuse about him. But this tournament, I'm sorry, if you're watching with your eyes, there is nothing you can tell me to convince me that Harry Kane is all of a sudden still this undroppable player. What I've seen this tournament is downright pathetic from Kane. Honestly. And England are in the semifinals despite him. Another one for me, Foden. I couldn't believe when at halftime the whole analysis was about Foden. And Foden, for me, I've actually probably been generous with him this tournament. Because I feel like at times he's been scapegoated. I feel like there were times in the group stage especially where Foden was playing better than Jude, but Jude was getting the plaudits and Foden was kind of saying, let's get dropped. But one thing I don't like, especially about excuses, is that Foden, everyone is saying play him in his best position. Southgate has basically adapted his entire team to actually get Foden in the position that everyone wants him to play. Jude Bellingham, pay attention to him, chat. Jude is playing on the left. Jude is not playing in Foden's position. Jude has now basically been turned into this pseudo left winger. And Foden is the one playing those central positions. So all this talk about Foden, he's not playing in the right role. The team's not... Yesterday was a perfect example of Gareth Southgate constructing his entire team, his entire setup to be built around Foden. Foden was getting the touches in the positions he likes to take. Foden was getting positions, central areas. Jude was played on the left to allow Foden to play where he wants. And Foden didn't have enough impact on the game. Foden, that's the biggest issue for me. Foden, for me, hasn't exactly played bad per se. There's been worse players than Foden. Kane, for me, is playing worse than Foden. But the issue is Foden isn't really impacting games. Like, he's not playing bad, but he's just not playing great either. For me, it's very easy to replace Foden. Because you know that, for the most part, nothing is really coming out of these performances. Like, he's neat, he's tidy, he'll combine once or twice pretty well, but for a player that just had the season he had, for me, he's been one of the most underwhelming players at this tournament. Not to say that he's been horrible, but there's just been nothing amazing about any of his performances. There hasn't been a single moment. And I think one thing about Foden too, we have to address now, for me, what's becoming a rapidly increasing misconception. Like, for example, I saw Micah Richards and Rio, I think, calling him the best number 10 in the world. For me, not for me. And second of all, a number 10 that doesn't create whatsoever. What kind of number 10 is that? Foden for me is almost like I like Foden a lot. This is not coming from a place of like hate. I actually think Foden is a brilliant player, even though he hasn't been brilliant whatsoever at this tournament. I like Foden, but he's not a creator. He's not a creator whatsoever. He doesn't really have a killer pass in his game. His vision isn't really that great. His best attribute is really his ball striking and his shiftiness. Foden is shifty. Foden manipulates his way out of tight situations, but his playmaking, again, when we talk about playmaking, right? He's not a great playmaker. He can strike the hell out of a ball. He can create a half a yard of space. He can manipulate his way out of tight situations. But in terms of actual playmaking, not for me. And this is why, for me, the David Silva comparisons have always been odd, right? I get it because they're City... Well, one of them is a City legend. One of them is probably on his way to become a City legend. And I get it, right? Like, they play the same kind of position. And I'm sure Foden's idol was David Silva. But bar that, the comparisons stop there. Foden is not a brilliant playmaker. He doesn't have brilliant vision. He's not a brilliant passer of the ball. So that's kind of the way I see things. For Foden to reach the next level, he has to improve his incisive passing. Yeah, but guys, this isn't career mode, right? You can't just like add attributes to a player, especially a player. How old is Foden now? Foden is 24 years old. That's not old, by the way. Foden is he's still a relatively young player. He's not like a kid, but he's still a relatively young player. Foden will get better. But also, you get to a point in your career where you don't just keep picking up attributes. At some point, you hit 28, and they say 28 is usually the peak of your career. 26, 27, 28. But it's the peak of your career because that's really when most of the attributes you've developed, they're at their max. But you don't just keep attribute stacking. That's not really how a player develops. At this point in your career, at 24, who you are is really who you are, and you can improve what you're already good at. But you're not going to just like suddenly come back one summer and have killer incisive passing in your locker. I can't really think of many players who have just developed like that. I can't lie. But yeah, England are a weird one, man. Honestly, this whole tournament in general is so weird. It's almost like whatever you've been conditioned to think about football, whatever your eyes are telling you during a game, whatever the advanced analytics are telling you, if you're a betting man, you should bet against whatever that's telling you. The fact that France, England, and the Dutch are in the Euro 2024 semifinal is mind-blowing for me. It's mind-blowing for me because in England and France, I don't think those two teams have played one convincing game yet. The Netherlands are starting to pick it up, but in the group stage, were pretty pathetic. But the last two knockout games, I can't lie, they've been nice. Spain are really the only team for me that have been like, wow, amazing. But it's such a weird tournament, man. It's such a weird tournament.